Okay, I'm going to officially call this meeting to order. It is Thursday, May 4th, and this is the Habitat Agency's Public Advisory Committee. Angie, could you do roll call, please?
Members Wolf, Edgerton,
Here.
Hindermeister, Hutchison,
Here.
Lovelace, Oliver,
Here.
Brown.
Here.
Walt's not here, folks. If you hadn't noticed, I'll be chairing the meeting tonight. Walt is away, I believe, at a conference. I don't have a report out from the chair this time around. Is there anything that Walt wanted said?
No.
Not that you're aware of. All right. Next is Public Advisory Committee member announcements. Are there any announcements from the committee members? No? All right, I'm going to use this opportunity. I've got a couple of announcements. One of them is the upcoming Bay Area Open Space Council meeting. Their big conference, yearly conference, is on May 18th, and they've just announced that Assembly Member Eduardo Garcia, who is the lead sponsor on the Assembly Park Bond Bill, will be joining them. That's AB 18, and I know that the Habitat Agency has some real interest in that bill, so I just wanted to mention that. And as well, the other thing I wanted to mention was that PG&E released its draft San Francisco Bay Area-wide HCP and the accompanying environmental assessment. So the environmental assessment is a federal level document, and that's U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. That's the lead agency on that one. The organization I work for, Committee for Green Foothills, has commented on that document. Given the scope and breadth of the document, it covers 32 species across the 9 Bay Area counties. And other extenuating factors that I'll mention in a moment. We retained the law firm of Shute, Mahaly and Weinberger to draft and submit comments on the draft HCP and the environmental assessment. And of the 32 species in that HCP, 7 of them, I believe, are also included in our habitat plan, and that would be the bay checker spot butterfly, the California tiger salamander, the California red-legged frog, the San Joaquin kit fox, the plant species Coyote ceanothus, the Santa Clara Valley dudleya, and the Metcalf Canyon jewel flower. And I would say that our first concern with the HCP and the EEA, that's short for the environmental assessment, was that despite our long history and ongoing engagement with PG&E, we were not notified of this document, the release of the document. We only found out from Fish and Wildlife about it 3 days before the close of the public comment. Fish and Wildlife did extend comment on the HCP, but not the EA, which we were disappointed in since the documents work in tandem. And briefly, a letter via Shute Mahaly brought out 3 main points in that the HCP and the environmental assessment failed to meet the requirements of the Endangered Species Act and NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, in that the HCP failed to adequately describe species occurrences in the study area. It failed to include adequate measures to avoid the lawful take of sensitive species, and the EA did not adequately address impacts to all impacted species from PG&E operations and maintenance activities. There are many other organizations that have weighed in. Of course, the Shute Mahaly letter is very detailed, but that's just the really big highlights. There will be apparently an environmental impact report that will be released by California Department of Fish and Wildlife at some point, we don't know when, and we'll be submitting comments on that as well. So just wanted to let you all know about that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Welcome, Kyle. So I guess we will, Kyle, do you have anything to, any announcements to make to the committee?
No.
None? All right. Then,
I thought of something that
yes.
I wanted to just briefly, I work for the Silicon Valley Land Conservancy. I just wanted to mention that we discovered a new population of red-legged frog on one of our properties this week. So that was really good news. So that's one of the covered species, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and we're actively looking for salamanders, but we hadn't found them yet, so.
Cool.
That was a good piece of news. The, what we call the Baskin Ridge property, which is right on Highway 101 in Burnell.
And I guess one last announcement I should make. I'm sorry, folks, I've got a few here. It's been a while. And another thing that I've done of late is commented on the environmental impact report for the Young Ranch project. As we all know, or as many of you might know, the Young Ranch, which is above Basking Ridge, is a 2,100-acre ranch parcel, large parcel, that is owned by YCS Investments, and they have put forth a proposal for luxury homes there in a community center. So that involves two jurisdictions, the county and the city of San Jose. The city of San Jose's letter brought up, as did ours, brought up many serious concerns with the project, the least of which was real problems with policies surrounding the Greenbelt urban service and the urban service area. Moving on, is any comments from the public on items not on the agenda? No? All right. We'll close public comment then, and we'll move on to our regular business. And the first would be approval of the February 2nd, 2017 meeting minutes. Your
moved.
motion?
Second.
Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. Thank you. Next, the Sycamore Alluvial Woodland Habitat Mapping and Regeneration Study.
Our speaker is stuck in traffic.
What a surprise.
Surprise. Guess there was an accident, another surprise.
Yes, yeah.
And so we're just going to reshuffle the agenda, if that's okay. We were going to move item number 5 up to number 2.
All right, wonderful. So annual report will be from Tara, was it?
Yes.
Okay, Tara Donovan, please.
Oh, here comes Matt now.
Well, this is Chance. Okay. Matt, we just swapped you out for me. I'm not giving your presentation, so don't worry. So this annual report is hot off the press. It's not actually completely written yet, but we all have all the numbers, we have all the maps, and this is the first anyone has heard of it, other than Ed this morning when I shared with him the PowerPoint presentation. So as part of our permits, so we have the federal and state ESA permits, we're required to do an annual report that covers a variety of compliance metrics that we track as part of the habitat plan. And so this is really going to go over kind of the highlights of those metrics and how we're doing so far in compliance with our permit. So here's our top 10. So in this past reporting year, we covered 57 projects. We've preserved 1,800 acres of land, and that's Coyote Ridge. And on Coyote Ridge, we've confirmed the presence of 11 of the 18 covered species. We've initiated or completed restoration across 6 sites in 3 different watersheds. We've initiated the creation of 1 plant population, that's the Coyote ceanothus. We've increased our total amount of burrowing owl breeding habitat under management agreements to 920 acres. We are in compliance with the stay-ahead provision. In this past year, we received 7 grants totaling $2.4 million and $8.3 million in revenue. These may be a little bit different than the numbers you've been seeing because we looked at just the past fiscal year, and we looked at revenue from projects that were covered. So sometimes we receive funding either sometimes a little after the close of the fiscal year for our books purposes, but we moved it into the reporting for those projects. And then we also streamlined 3 projects through the regional general permit. And now, for the next 20 minutes, I will elaborate on these 10 issues. So our covered projects. This is for our reporting year. We covered 3 participating special entity projects, 31 private projects, and 23 public projects. They had impacts totaling 600 acres of permanent impacts, 118 acres of temporary impacts, and 15 feet of permanent impacts to streams with 840 feet of temporary impacts to streams. You can see here that private and public projects make up the bulk of our impacts, with private having slightly more than public in terms of the impacts of acreages, and then our participating special entities have very small impacts for their projects. So where are these? So we have 17 projects permitted by the City of San Jose, 7 by Morgan Hill, 3 by Gilroy, and 4 by the County of Santa Clara. These are all the private projects permitted during the fiscal year 15-16.
These are development projects.
Correct. And then for the public projects, some of these are infrastructure development, maintenance. Some of them are, that's kind of the 2 types they generally are. So the City of San Jose had 6 projects, 1 with county planning, 15 with county fleets and facilities, 3 participating special entity projects, 1 by the Habitat Agency, this was our restoration project, and then 10 were done by the Santa Clara Valley Water District. So where are we in terms of year-to-date? So with across our 2 reporting periods, we've impacted about 1,100 acres of had 1,100 acres of permanent impacts and about 200 acres of temporary impacts. But what kind of impacts are they? Well, most of these impacts are occurring in urban areas and agricultural areas, with just about 15% occurring on natural lands. So we're really seeing kind of infill of urban areas and then development of agricultural lands more than we're seeing of development of natural lands. And so natural lands, I mean grasslands, forests, and aquatic habitats. So how about the number of projects? So between our first 2 years and our 3rd year, which is this current reporting year, we saw a jump in about 10 projects, and that's mostly due to increased private development in fiscal year 15-16. So we permitted 49 projects across the first 2 years, and then 57 in this past fiscal year. And we're seeing a decline in the number of projects that we'll be permitting within the current fiscal year. You'll see here, we've only received applications or final applications for 36 projects. So we're seeing a slowdown, particularly in the private sector. You'll see that our public projects are kind of consistent over the reporting periods, but our private projects have decreased in the upcoming year. All right, enough of projects. Next, we'll talk about the open space preservation and implementation of our conservation strategy. As you know, we've preserved the Coyote Ridge Open Space Preserve in partnership with the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. They own fee title of this property, and then we have a conservation easement over it. This area, we anticipated to find 14 of our 18 covered species there. It also provides habitat for other native species like the elk and the badger, and we use cattle as our primary management tool on the reserve. So who's there? So we've confirmed that the bay-checker spot butterfly is present. Indeed, a quarter to 50% of the whole Coyote Ridge population is located on the Coyote Ridge open space property. And then we've been using cattle grazing as well as invasive species management to manage for the species. But the California red-legged frog, also there. We found it breeding in 2 of the 6 ponds, and then sheltering in 3 of 6 ponds, plus a failed pond, seep, and stream. There's a huge population of red-legged frogs in this area extending beyond the property, so it's very good that we're also providing habitat for it on Cardi Ridge. And so to improve occupancy by the species, we are going to restore 2 ponds, excavate 2 ponds to increase their hydro period, or the length of time that they hold water. And we're also going to be doing a fencing project with OSA to upgrade fencing throughout the property, as well as fencing off some sensitive aquatic areas. So California tiger salamander, also there. We have it breeding in 3 of the 6 ponds, and we're going to be doing the same actions for this species as for the red-legged frog. There's no foothill yellow-legged frog on the property. This is primarily due to the absence of habitat for the species. The type of streams it normally inhabits aren't present on the property, and the closest known occurrences are pretty far away. So we will not be doing any management specific for this species on the property. Western pond turtle, also not there, not sure why. And so as part of our 2 restoration projects, we will install basking habitat for it. We have overwintering burrowing owls on the property, and we're hoping to encourage them to breed there as well. So we'll be doing some artificial burrow installation, either on our property or the neighboring water district or BTA properties, since the lands there might be more suitable. But we're hoping to get burrowing owls breeding up on the ridge. The tricolor blackbird is not found on site. As part of our restoration projects, we'll be installing vegetation and hoping to attract tricolor blackbirds, if not breeding population, but perhaps just foraging on the property. So those are our covered animal species. What about the plants? Okay. So we have the Santa Clara Valley Dudleya. It is present on the property, and we had several assumptions when we developed the habitat plan in terms of where the plants were located. So I wanted to kind of go through what we assumed we'd find there versus what's actually there based on our baseline surveys we've done. So the habitat plan assumed 108 occurrences. And so a Dudley occurrence is defined as a group of individuals on a rock outcropping within a quarter mile of another rock outcropping. So the extent of each rock outcrop that's within a quarter mile of one another is considered an occurrence of this species. We found 60,000 plants, but we're not quite sure how to aggregate them. They're everywhere. And so it's going to take us a little bit more time to figure out how many occurrences we have. So fragrant fritillary, this is our banner species on our logo, so also present on the property. We had thought there were 3 occurrences, but we've only found 2, with 30,000 plants between the 2 of them. Loma Prieta Hoyta, we didn't, and we have found 2 occurrences totaling a little over 200 plants. Mount Hamilton thistle, also there. We assumed 16 occurrences, but likely only 5 occurrences with 20,000 plants across the 5. Smooth Lysingea, also there. We assumed 1 occurrence, but we didn't quite know how big it was. It covers the entire property with 27.5 million plants. It's likely that the entire Cardi Ridge is a single occurrence of Smooth Lysingea, rather than having multiple occurrences. It's very prolific up on Cardi Ridge. The most beautiful jewel flower, we assumed we had 3 occurrences. We're finding also it's much more widespread than we thought. Those 3 occurrences are actually only 2 occurrences with over 3 million plants. Metcalf Canyon jewel flower, these are really found interspersed within the jewel flowers, so it's a little tricky determining what an occurrence of this is. We assumed that there is 1 occurrence, but if we use kind of that quarter mile distance, we're finding that they are separated, and there's about 8 occurrences on the property with nearly 1 million plants. Go ahead.
Can you repeat what the third plant down is?
The Smoothlicengia.
The
Oh, the third one down, Loma Prieta Hoyta.
Ah, the Hoyta, okay.
Hoyta.
that's right, Okay.
Don't ask me their scientific names.
The what?
Their scientific names.
That's it, Hoyta.
The Hoyta, yeah. And just so you know, these are all serpentine species, and for those that are listed, the recovery target for an occurrence is about 5,000 individuals. So you can see that the populations or occurrences we have on Coyote Ridge are very robust, and that they're much bigger than we thought they would be. So that's really good news.
When you say the Coyote Ridge, you're talking about just that new property?
This is
not
just our
the
property,
entire Coyote
not the
Ridge?
entire.
Okay, I just want to be.
So you're likely to find all of these species in other locations on Coyote Ridge as well. This is just within our 1,800 acres.
On the Young Ranch, you find all these plants, for instance. Yeah.
Okay, moving on to restoration. So we have 6 restoration sites across 3 watersheds. In the Guadalupe watershed, we have a pond and wetland project at Calero County Park. In the Coyote watershed, we have a stream restoration project at Grant County Park, and then 2 pond restoration projects on Coyote Ridge. And then in the Pajaro watershed, we have a riparian restoration project at the Gonzales Ranch. All right, so I'm just going to walk through each of our restoration projects, where they are, what the benefits are, and what the status is. So the first one is the Pond and Wetland Project at Calero County Park. We completed this in partnership with County Parks and the San Jose Water Company, and it benefits 4 covered species: the California tiger salamander, California red-legged frog, western pond turtle, and the Mount Hamilton thistle. It has both pond and wetland restoration components, and it also provides year-round water for cattle through troughs and a storage tank. This was completed in 2016, and we have documented occurrences of 3 of the 4 covered species so far. We're missing red-legged frog, but we're going to continue serving later this season. So the Coyote Ridge Open Space Preserve, we're doing a restoration project in partnership with the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. We're targeting red-legged frog, California tiger salamander, and western pond turtle, and possibly some benefits also for the tricolor blackbird. We'll be doing both pond and wetland restoration at 2 pond sites that the berms are blown off and they're just not functioning as ponds anymore. One was completely dry at the end of the rainy season. One was holding some water, but the spillway was blown out. At both sites, we also plan to have water available for cattle to increase the extent of, to kind of move the cattle around a little bit more on the property. So we're planning that project right now and anticipate construction in 2018. So Gonzales Ranch, this was done in partnership with the Nature Conservancy and the Point Blue Straw Program. This is intended to be a wildlife corridor. It's to link along the Pajaro River and its current channel as well as historic channel to provide a linkage between the Diablo Range and the Santa Cruz Mountains. It's being implemented primarily with school children, and so they're coming out learning about the natural communities and actually planting trees as part of the project. This is ongoing. And we're also using a climate smart plant palette here, so ensuring that there are seeds and fruit available year-round for wildlife in the area. So at Joseph Grant Park, we're working with County Parks to do a riparian, stream, and wetland restoration project to both improve floodplain connectivity as well as improve some of the park infrastructure. What we noticed during our initial planning was that the existing roads and trail are serving as kind of river channels and helping to, so part of our project will be to move water off of those and into the riparian stream system and allow for increased groundwater recharge. So we're planning that right now, and we anticipate building it, at least one phase of it this year. Okay. So Coyote Cenotes, we talked about this last year. So we are responsible for protecting a total of 5 populations of Coyote Cenotes in our permit area. There are only 3. So the Water District has taken the lead on creating a new population of Coyote cenotes, and they are required to do so in advance, within 5 years of the impact of the first impacts to that species, and they've already removed plants, so we are in the population creation phase. So the initial planting for this species failed due to site contamination with Phytophthora. They planted the site, it was doing great, and then this water mold attacked all the plants and resulted in mortality of every plant that was planted. Since then, the Water District has done site remediation. They've solarized all the plant basins, and all but 2 are confirmed free of Phytophthora, with additional 2 that will it's still being detected. It's not spreading, but they're going to be trying to do a steam auger at that site. The sites are a little more shady, or those basins are shadier, so the solarization didn't quite work. But the Water District is at the forefront of creating this plant population. And so over the past 2 winters, they've done both direct seeding as well as doing planting plants. So the direct seeding almost had nearly 100% germination. They planted 120 plant basins across 3 sites and had germination from seeds at nearly all of them. They did lose some due to predation. Something got in there and ate the plants. And so during this most recent planting, they did a combination of direct seeding as well as using plant stock that they had verified was Phytophthora free. And they've been using Phytophthora best management practices to avoid contamination of the site. So we are experiencing very high success here with the plant population creation. Okay, boring owls, our favorite, the most photogenic of our covered species, perhaps. And so we recently, perhaps the species we present the most to you about, because we're doing the most for them. So we've already presented about protection of the regional wastewater facility buffer lands. Just over 200 acres has been enrolled under a management agreement with about 70 acres that will be put under conservation easement. We now are protecting are managing over 900 acres of breeding habitat for the species. And the wastewater facility continues to be our most successful breeding location. They had the highest number of pairs and juveniles during the past monitoring period. Stay ahead. Perhaps the most boring thing to talk about, but one of the most important things for our permit. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about it. We are required with our permit to have our impacts, our protection ahead of our impacts. And we can aggregate it by natural community in terms of our compliance tracking. So we have to be within 10% of our impacts in terms of our conservation achieved. So if we have impact, so you can see here for grasslands, we've impacted about 7% of our total allowable impacts. But we have preserved about 9% of our requirements. So we are ahead. And so for all the natural communities, as well as western boring owl, we are either ahead or within that 10% variance. This is the first year we're reporting on the stay ahead, so this is where we're at. So for grasslands, chaparral and coastal scrub, oak woodlands, wetlands, ponds, and streams, we are truly ahead. So we are, the percent of the required protection achieved is ahead of the allowable impacts accrued. And then we are within the variance for riparian forest and scrub, wetlands, and boring owl.
So can I ask a question? So the requirement there is not for each habitat, but as an average of the total? Is that, am I correct?
So we aggregated by natural community. So grassland includes California annual grassland, serpentine grassland, rock outcrops. I think serpentine seeps are all part of the grasslands natural community. Oak woodland includes all the different oak woodland types.
No, you're not getting to my question. So if there's 9 habitats there and we're ahead in 7 of them, but we're behind in 2, are we considered behind?
We're not-
If the other 7 offset that, or?
No, because it's by each natural community, but we have a 10% variance. So we can be within 10%, and we are.
But if one of them goes below 10%, then you're out of compliance. Is that
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify how that works.
Yeah. Okay, for plants, again, this is, against our total allowable impacts incurred, and then the total conservation achieved. For some of the species, we're truly ahead. The other ones were within a 10% variance. And I'm going to talk about that right now. So for Santa Clara Valley Dudleya, we have impacted a plant population and removed, I think about, actually, I have to look at my notes for this one. We impacted a plant population in which we removed a total, 4 plants were directly impacted and 118 plants were indirectly impacted. But we have 60,000 plants preserved. So as far as, are we in compliance? Yes. Have we identified the number of occurrences we protected? No, we're still establishing that. So I think we're safe there. For smooth Lysingea, the occurrence that was removed included 6 plants. That's it, 6. But we have 27.5 million plants preserved. I think we're okay. So why? Because it's on strict occurrences, not the number of plants. So that's where you have to look at it. We have the strict, like, are we in compliance by occurrences? Maybe, but we have a lot more protected. So we have to consider that as well.
Yeah, the plant conditions are, conservation strategy conditions are wonky. In that way, yeah, unfortunately. But it does give you the impression that, as Tara was explaining, that there's a problem, but it's not proportional, and that's something we're talking to the wildlife agencies about. Yeah.
And then for most beautiful jewel flower, we've removed a single occurrence of 110 plants, but we have 3 million plants preserved. So part of it is just how do we define an occurrence? What does success look like? And talking to the wildlife agencies about that. So we are in compliance with our stay ahead provision for all of our aquatic land cover types, but I look at them to inform our restoration and our acquisition planning. And so it's easier for me to kind of break these down into a little bit more detail so we can look ahead to think about, where are we in terms of hitting these specific ratios on a land cover by land cover basis for our aquatic land cover types, because restoration takes so long to do, and planning out projects takes time as well. So for all of our aquatic land cover types, we have a preservation ratio plus a restoration ratio. So for riparian, Coyote Ridge doesn't really preserve a lot of riparian, but Calero does. So Calero County Park is our next enrollment, and we're anticipating that happening this year. And then our restoration project at Grant will also restore riparian woodlands as part of it. For perennial wetlands, we're good. We have that preserved on Coyote Ridge, and our most recent restoration project at Calero restored that land cover type. Seasonal wetlands, the same. We have it preserved at Coyote Ridge, and we're also targeting it as part of our Grant restoration project. Ponds, we're good. We've got lots of ponds on Coyote Ridge, and then we also included it as part of our most recent restoration project at Calero. And for streams, we have a lot preserved, but we haven't done restoration yet, and we will be doing that at Grant. So this kind of lines up, how, you might ask, how do we prioritize our restoration projects? This is how we do it. Okay, let's talk about money. So our revenue comes from two different sources. We have our fee funding and then our non-fee funding. Our fee funding in this past fiscal year was $4.8 million. It included land cover fees, serpentine, nitrogen deposition, boring owl, wetlands, and PSE charges. Our non-fee funding was about $3.5 million, which included grants as well as voluntary contributions and mitigation-only agreements. And so how does that compare to last year? So last reporting year, we had a lot more money. That's because we budgeted, and that was actually done by other local partners. So this whole area here, the top part there, this purple area, that's OSA's purchase of Coyote Ridge. And so we actually never really saw that money. But in terms of our habitat plan and looking at what assumptions went into how much things cost, how much we're going to spend, we track that because we receive federal funding, we receive state funding. There was a local contribution, and we want to know, what about that when we look back at the habitat planning effort, were our assumptions that we made during that actually panning out during implementation. So we do track this land acquisition by other people as part of our revenue for our habitat plan and our permit compliance.
And an important thing to note on that is that $5.7 million of the acquisition for Coyote Ridge was because of the existence of the plan. So those dollars were available to OSA that wouldn't have been available if the plan wasn't in place. So that's sort of the regional benefit of the plan. And as Tara noted, OSA and others did all the hard work getting the grants. I think TNC was involved in a lot of that too. But it was the plan, the existence of the plan led to that investment in our community. And it's the same with the LAGs, those local assistance grants, which are funding a lot of the scientific research. It's the existence of the plan, even as the plan was just getting up and going in 2013, there were LAGs starting to be sort of granted to this region. So that's one of the big advantages of the plan. And there's others too, but I'll talk to you about that later.
All right, and so when you take that away, there was about $9.2 million of funding received directly by the Habitat Agency or through LAGs to other local partners. And so year over year, and so Ed talked about this a little bit, so our grants, to date, most of the grants have not been going to the Habitat Agency. They have been going to other people in our permit area because of the existence of the habitat plan. And so, but those grants do benefit habitat plan implementation. And I'm noticing the colors on this don't really allow you to tell that. But you can see over the first 2 years, the majority of the grant funding went to OSA. And now it's shifting a little bit more to the Habitat Agency. But grants have been awarded to Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority, to us, to the Guadalupe County Regional Resource Conservation District, San Francisco Estuary Institute, UC Santa Cruz, San Francisco Bird Bay Observatory, the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society, and then Talon Ecological. So there was, everyone is implementing the habitat plan together. And so we've gotten a total of $1.3 million worth of grants to, through last fiscal year. Sure.
So I think you've kind of already addressed it, but I just want it absolutely clear in my head, because that was one of the things when I was looking at the budget and I was seeing the difference between grant funding from year to year and then what we were predicting for this year. I was like, why are we dropping off to such a degree? So it's really because of this amalgamation that benefited the Habitat Agency, but the funds actually went to other agencies, like the OSA was recipient of the lion's share. Is that how that's parsing out?
With this past fiscal year? Yes. Yeah, so the monies that Tara's referring to, most of the 9.2 went to an escrow account, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's reflected in our
Yes.
budget nonetheless?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
I just wanted to be absolutely clear on that.
But when I present to you about the budget, I didn't, last year, I didn't include the 9.2 in our budget. The 9.2. It was only grants that we got. So last year, so for last fiscal year's budget, the final numbers, it isn't going to show 9.2. It's only, the 14 is for real this fiscal year, yes. Correct. It's not anybody
through
else.
another
No,
agency, there's not another-
these are grants that we wrote or had consultants write for us.
Okay, all right, well, sorry,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
we'll get to that
yeah,
conversation.
yeah,
I apologize, all right.
Don't want to spoil the exciting budget talk after this. All right. So one of the primary benefits of the Habitat Plan is this idea of local control and increased certainty for project permitting. And so we've permitted a total of 106 projects through the Habitat Plan endangered species permits to date, and a whopping 3 with our new Army Corps engineer projects. And that is our Calera Restoration Project, the San Jose Stormwater System Improvements, which actually included 13 different outfall structures, as well as a private Watsonville Road widening project. So now for the quiz. Did I cover all 10 of these points? All right. So thank you. I wanted to say these are all the different folks that contribute to the success of the Habitat Plan. And so just a little acknowledgement of our local partners, co-permittees, and consultants that all work with us. And then any questions?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. That was a really excellent report. Really appreciate that. And also congratulations that you only had to look at your notes once. That's pretty fantastic. I will start by opening it up to members' questions.
Yeah, I have questions. One is, I'd like to understand how we're accounting for Coyote Ridge. So the original plan had, I don't have the exact numbers, but some number of acres were due to be enrolled by other public agencies like the Open Space Authority and county parks. And then there was some number of new land that we were going to own fee title through the Habitat Plan. So how does that 800 acres of Coyote Ridge, what kind of bucket does that fall into?
That falls into new lands acquired. Buck.
That's new land, so that's not land that Open Space Authority is enrolling.
No.
Okay.
Or county parks.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So the other question I had has to do with Berwyn owls, and maybe it's a complicated question. But it's about the stay-ahead provision. So my understanding of the stay-ahead provision is that we had to stay, in terms of I think we had separate stay-ahead for managed lands and fee title land. But my understanding was that we were supposed to stay within 10% of the impacted land. So when I look at your figure, or your diagram, I guess I don't see that. I mean, to me, it seems like funny math.
It
Because,
is.
you know,
I mean, it's not funny math, but
yeah, math is not
It is
funny, I'm
Excel.
sorry. But I would have expected to see, like, if there was, say, 200 acres of impact, I would expect us to see us be within 10% of that absolute number of impacted acres. And that's not really what 10% is on this chart. I mean, this chart shows us, like, for example, if I was to look at this, I would say the 10% stay ahead would mean that we would have to be within 2.5% of 25%. So like going between 22.5 to 27.5%, which would be an absolute acre comparison.
you could do the numbers that way, but this shows as absolute 10%.
This is I don't think this is, my understanding was the Habitat Plan had absolute acreage, so that we wanted to be within 10% of the actual number of impacted areas, impacted acres. And I don't think when it's shown like this as a percent of the allowable impacts, that's what we're getting. You see my question? I mean, we could work some numerical examples, but that just doesn't, I don't feel like that is what I remember the plan saying.
So we've pretty much hit we've removed 25% of our allowable burrowing owl breeding habitat.
Yeah.
But we've protected, what's this, 16% through management agreements at this point in time. And that's what this is showing. Of the land, total land anticipated to be under management agreement.
So can I hear
And I
exactly
agree,
what you're
and I
saying. That
agree,
came up
it
to me.
looks funny.
Well,
and-
I think
and we-
if we could read the plan, there's difference between percentage points and percentage.
Okay,
So percentage points is the 10 that you're showing here, but a percentage is 10% of the yellow line, which is what Jan's
Yeah,
saying.
for
And I was thinking about that myself.
Yeah.
and
For example, like, just think of this as an example. Let's say that our impacts accrued was 20%. Okay, if we just use this, we would say that 10% in green, or required protection achieved, would be okay, because we would be within 10%. But what I would say is that if you've accrued 20% of impacts and you've got 10%, you've only achieved half the amount that you needed to, right? Because that kind of makes sense? So that's kind of that's why I was thinking funny math.
Yeah, we could look, so what are the total acres of burrowing owl?
I don't have it with me. I only have pictures.
So when this report, like you said, this is your
Actually.
first pass at it, right? There's a written report that comes with this.
Correct.
Will the written report parse this out
Yes,
so that it is very clear what Jan is referring to, and so that is addressed?
correct.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to, like, hold feet to the fire here, because I recognize that the Berwyn owl thing is isn't a particularly difficult issue. But I think that's, I think we also just need to be consistent with what's, because I even think we had some worked examples in one of the appendices or something of the plan. So I would just encourage us to kind of go back and relook at
Sure.
what these numbers really mean. And then as a follow-on question, so when we say that we've got some percent of required protection achieved, is that then covering, say, like I think we heard that there were 70 acres under conservation easement? Is that what we mean by required protection achieved? Because we have managed acres.
Yep.
We have a kind of a provision for that, and also provision for breeding habitat permanently protected.
Yeah, it's
I believe.
600 acres
Right,
of breeding habitat.
yeah. So this means
Yeah.
that we have like say 17% of 600 is, I don't know, 100 and some.
Yeah.
So we have 100 some permanently protected areas via
We
either
have-
fee title or conservation easement.
This accounts also for management agreements.
Yes, because I thought, I mean, again, I may be wrong, because I may not remember the details, but I thought we had separate,
Yeah, it was 600 acres, and, I don't know the plan as well as Tara does, but it was 600 acres of owl habitat to be protected. The problem is, we all know where the owls are. Some of the most expensive real estate in the world.
whole problem.
Yeah, and hopefully they'll start going south. I don't know. Yeah, the owl thing, the plan is that the plants, the owls, there's some really wonky things with this plan. Some of the species we cover, I don't get it, because they don't occur in the county, or they haven't in decades. But yeah, the owls, there is a acreage requirement to acquire breeding habitat. And our hope is along the Pajaro River, because of the birds that are breeding in the Wildlands Mitigation Bank property.
So then this one isn't really, I mean, that's the thing I think needs to be
Yeah.
made clear. Is this really acquisition, as
No.
it says, or is it
Well,
really
it's partially, because,
land managed?
I tried to get the wastewater facility to put all 200 acres into a conservation easement, and they refused. So it was only for projects that so the 72 acres represents the NCCP requirement for recovery and the actual mitigation for 3 projects that they're doing in and around the plant. And it came out to 72 acres. They refused to put in the full 201. So the properties, the 201's under a management agreement, and so we're now paying for management out there. If we weren't there, they were going to stop. They had grant funding, and they ran out of grant funding. So if one good thing came out of it, we have the monies. We went in there and did this. We're also trying to do stuff at Moffett, which is it's a labyrinth of federal bureaucracy and private development interests, and but we've had meetings with Google and with Moffett on 2 occasions, NASA on a couple occasions. So if we can get in there, then this will look a lot better. Yeah. And-
I'm just saying
yeah.
that for this, I mean, we really want to be clear
Yes, understood.
with land acquisition.
Yeah.
Exactly what we're.
Yeah, it's 72 acres is acquisition, and
So this actually has the amount under management agreement,
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm gathering, which.
because the true metric here is conservation achieved. So I should change that legend.
Well, it's just
So
that-
it
it's just
doesn't,
that-
it's regardless of, yeah,
It says land acquisition.
yeah.
But also, I mean, again, you maybe remember this better than I do, but I did think we had 2 stay-aheads, one for breeding habitat and one for managing lands. I mean,
yeah, there's the wintering habitat too, so if you could throw that in. Yeah, and that's protected, but they don't breed there.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I'll stop there. I think I've made my,
No, you made a good point. Thank you. Yeah. And we'll do a better job of splicing that and explaining that. Yep.
Thank you.
I just had one suggestion where you show the pictures of the plants and animals. It'd be nice to have the names. I mean, I know most of them. I got mixed up on one, but most people don't. So it'd be
Okay.
good to have a little title of what they are, so just a suggestion.
Thank you.
Could I ask one more question, if nobody minds? So the other question was, you know, we had, I forget, for restoring ponds, there were 2 blown-out ponds?
Yeah.
That's what I heard. So, as I understand the way the plan works, we're gonna fix those up. And then, once they're fixed up, then we're really responsible through our, I forget what the word is, but through our escrow fund for maintenance, for in perpetuity maintenance of those ponds, you know, that
Correct.
we've restored.
Correct.
Okay. That's kind of what I thought, and
Yes.
I wanted to ask that question, just make sure I'm.
The endowment in today's dollars is 90 to 100 million. And the idea is that it'll grow bigger than that, but the amount of fee revenues that are skimmed off and invested in the endowment is equivalent to about 90 to 100 million dollars. Yeah,
Okay, thanks.
you're welcome.
Any other questions from the members?
No, I just had the same suggestion as Craig, as identify the photos, because I don't know the names.
Yeah, we could do that for the animals too.
So I just wanted to, just a couple of quick comments. One, I did appreciate the charts. You might have thought they were the most boring part, but I think for a lot of folks,
The most important part.
it's probably, yeah, the most important ones. So I think that I really appreciate, Jan, your comments, because we really need to get this right. Once this goes out into the public, we want to make sure that this is, very clear. You got a tight ship on this one. And yeah, the other comments too as well. Thank you very much, because again, this is a public document. People who pick this up are not that familiar with the Habitat Plan, but they've heard of it. So we want to make sure that they can easily, if they're going to glean through this, it's easy for them to get the big picture without getting confused. And I would come back to, aside from the acreage, it's just the same when you mentioned the occurrences. Nobody's going to know that, So again, we really want to make sure we make that clear in the document. But again, thank you so much, Tara. It was a great presentation. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I did have one
Please.
more question. You talked about revenue and income. Is included on there any grants that were issued by the agency to other people? Is that something that you track or look at?
Yes, we've matched several of those lags that were given to the various organizations implementing the lags.
Okay, but you don't
No.
track that in the
Oh,
annual report of how much?
we haven't given out any grants ourselves, no, but we have.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, but we have partnered on some Phytophthora research with U.S. Forest Service, the Water District, and Google on trying to get dogs trained to sniff out Phytophthora. So we helped fund that research, and we're continuing to do that.
Okay, so you say you helped fund it, but you haven't given any grants. I'm a little confused on that. So how would you fund it if not through a grant?
Oh, it wasn't through a grant. It was just through, we haven't issued any grants ourselves, no, zero. We're a funding partner on some research.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah,
Okay, I
yeah.
got confused.
Yeah.
Okay.
One small last question. Let me see here. It's one of the first slides, I think, we were talking about, and I noticed that, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit in the budget. But projects, there's going to be a dip coming up. Is that what's projected? You were talking about that, or?
Yeah, it only reflects up to the third quarter.
Yeah,
So it's
okay.
going to be less. Tara's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
But if you'll notice, it only says through third quarter.
Okay.
We'll have
Oh,
a
yes,
better,
I see.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I see.
we'll
Okay,
have a
yes.
better idea, July.
All right,
But
okay.
I'm expecting it to be less than the 57, probably low 40s.
And is
to
there any
mid-40s.
specific reason for,
Tara and I were talking about it today, San Jose. Yeah.
again, Sanders?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
They didn't really permit that many projects in the first couple of years, and they permitted a lot last year. And I just think it's kind of like their permitting cycle, if I had to guess.
So Matt is now here, so, yeah.
To number 2, Sycamore Alluvial Woodland Habitat Mapping and Regeneration Study. Welcome, Matt, and thank you very much, Tara.
So is this mic always on, or am I having, should I turn it on and off?
It's on.
Okay, and I can rotate through here. Okay, so.
And thank you, Matt, for coming today. Appreciate it.
No problem. Yeah, so a quick introduction and a little background. My name's Matt Quinn. I'm a soil and restoration ecologist with H.T. Harvey and Associates up in Los Gatos. And I was part of a group 6 or 7 years ago that started to meet, that included myself, representatives from the Santa Clara Valley Water District and from California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And we called ourselves the Sycamore Working Group. And we would get together and start just sharing our experiences and observations of what was occurring with sycamores on the landscape. At one point, we started to share literature during these discussions, lunch meetings and things, and there was a particular document that we all really keyed in on, which was published in 1996, led by an individual, Todd Keeler-Wolf, who was with Department of Fish and Wildlife, and he really went into depth about what the processes were behind having a sustainable and healthy sycamore alluvial woodland type of habitat where you have, it's a dynamic system. It's typically, intermittent streams with coarse alluvium where you get winter flows that really rework the channel and the floodplains, where you can have areas that are suitable for establishment and regeneration of sycamore. He led, as part of that study, a statewide mapping effort where there was a minimum threshold of 10-acre size, and identified that there were only 17 occurrences that were at least 10 acres in size left in the state at that time. Whoa. So we started contemplating, after talking for a number of years, what kind of actions can we take to really, start to support the science behind this particular habitat type to help preserve it and hopefully restore it. So we started looking at different funding opportunities and ideas behind putting together a proposal. We approached Ed at the time because we knew the VHP included a goal of 40 acres of acquisition and an additional 14 acres of restoration of this sycamore alluvial woodland habitat. So with the Habitat Agency's support, the Water District's support, and internal CDFW support, we approached San Francisco Estuary Institute, SFEI, who most folks know as the historical ecology go-to folks. They also have very qualified hydrologists and geomorphologists. So we teamed with them and we applied for one of the local assistance grants. When we started contemplating what it was that we wanted to do, we knew that we wanted to build a foundation that not only our group but others could build off of in the future. So we thought that a general habitat mapping and regeneration study was a good place to start. When we started thinking about, okay, we got to limit to a degree, I kind of felt like I was back in grad school identifying a thesis topic and you have 100 questions and you got to hone it down onto just a few. We went through that process and started to think, okay, some simple questions to build off of. The first one being, are there really site characteristics that jump out at you in locations that support a healthy sycamore alluvial woodland habitat type? We wanted to look at what kind of land management practices were occurring and what potential effects, positive or negative, they may have on this habitat. We wanted to consider what type of active restoration strategies we could consider when all the literature was showing there was a, whether it's perceived or real, a concern over hybridization with the London plane tree, which is a street tree, sycamore. A lot of people consider it sycamore. It looks very similar. But there's concern over hybridization with the California native sycamore. And there's also concern over the ability to propagate the plants from cuttings, which has been extremely difficult over the years, shown by many different studies. And then finally, not to leave the Habitat Agency out, of course, we want to identify new areas that you all could consider for acquisition and restoration. So we worked with the Open Space Authority and Caltrans to identify 2 locations to start with. The first one being Upper Coyote Creek. So that's up Gilroy Hot Springs Road by the Hunting Hollow entrance to Henry Coe. It's a higher elevation in comparison to the other site, which is Pacheco Creek, which I'll mention in a moment. It's more of a canyon setting there, but it does support a relatively broad floodplain with a very relatively large stand of sycamore alluvial woodland. And the other site was down at Pacheco Creek along 152 by Casa de Fruta. I'm sure most folks have driven by there and seen those. And that was a Caltrans site, which is luckily in the process of transferring to the Habitat Agency. But they also provided us access to conduct the study there. It's a lower elevation. It's much open, more broad, and it's what we considered a managed system because of the upstream reservoirs. And at Upper Coyote, there is no upstream reservoir control for the hydrology. Just to make it clear, that the black polygons on the map here are all areas that supported sycamore that the VHP already identified. And the red polygon is one of the ones that the 1996 Keeler-Wolf study identified as one of the 17 larger than 10-acre stands in the state. The 2 study areas within each of these locations are not these entire polygons. They're a subset and they're very similar size, and we did that purposefully for the study. Yes, sir.
So are you saying that in 96, the red area was the size of the habitat and now it's been reduced to that size? To the black spots?
That's a great question, and I can't confirm for sure yes or no because
Just take
of...
a guess.
Yeah. I not knowing exactly what Keeler-Wolf's interpretation of what those boundaries are.
Oh, okay.
I can't say for certain,
okay, I didn't know.
but I would say based on having observed that location for my entire life, it's been reduced.
Okay, that's what I was...
And we'll touch on that as we step through the study.
And just, I have a question as well, just to clarify. So it's just those 2 areas, the one up, which looks like it's heading into Coyote Valley from the 101, that is not included in this study? You just identified it because it's in the habitat plan?
Yeah, this base file, this map,
Okay.
was just capturing that.
All right,
And I
okay.
used it
All right,
for this.
okay.
Yeah.
Cheating there, right.
But it's just the 2 that we're looking at for this first study. So we decided we should come up with some hypotheses, again, simple hypotheses to help guide us through the study. So the first one, or pair, were in regards to what we would anticipate distribution of sycamores in these 2 different settings. Again, a natural setting at Upper Coyote versus a managed setting at Pacheco Creek. So we thought here there probably wouldn't be much significant difference between distribution in regards to geomorphic zones, which, you know, whether it's right on a channel or a gravel bar or different floodplain settings, and then also just strict distance from a main channel. We thought in general you're going to see younger trees closer to the main channel, and as you move further away they're going to get older, and as you get on to higher geomorphic settings, older floodplains, you're going to have older trees. So again, a very simple set of hypotheses there. In regards to the general health of the trees, we thought, well, as I'll touch on, there was a health and vigor scoring or a rating that we do in regards to that, just general health of the tree, kind of like an arborist would do. You know, you're looking at the foliage and the branching structure and how much dead wood there is in the tree. And then we looked at strict mortality, whether it was alive or dead, and then specifically plant pathogen anthracnose. And the reason we chose that is because it's extremely prevalent across landscape, and it's species specific for sycamore. So we thought for all three of these that you were very likely to have, under a natural system, healthier trees with less mortality, and they would be more resistant to all pathogens, and in particular the one that we are looking at, anthracnose. There'd be a lower incidence there. In regards to regeneration, new growth, by that we mean, you know, from seed, saplings, seedlings coming up, and then root crown sprouting is a common way for sycamore to regenerate, and then just strict seed production. All three of these we felt we would have more in a natural system. So again, at Upper Coyote, we thought in general, based on this natural system versus a managed, we would see quite a bit more regeneration. So we collected a ton of data, and one of the first things we did was prepare an annotated, well, in the end, we're able to prepare an annotated bibliography from all the literature review that we did. And then in the field.
And it's available, sorry, Matt, it's available on our webpage. If you, yep. So I can send you guys the link. It's not very intuitive where to find it.
And then we collected a bunch of data on the geomorphic conditions. We looked at some simple hydrology, you know, are there visual evidence of different flow dynamics there, and some very simple hydrologic modeling, which I'll touch on. We looked at individual trees and identifying their location and their size and their health. We looked at regeneration, the different types of regeneration that was occurring, and then if there were particular plant associations, you know, associated with the type of regeneration that was occurring. Again, there's a bunch of data, and it's all in the report. Was also on the site. There's a link to all that. So I want to just give a few examples of what we were able to generate from this. So here, what you're looking at are the two sites, and the base map for each with the different colored polygons are the geomorphic zones. So with LiDAR data is where we started with, and then field truthing in the field to map out these different landforms. And then all the dots, point data, are individual trees. This specific set of data are for size class. So the blue dots are large trees, which are over 40-inch diameter breast height, so DBH. The orange are medium, which we put in a 6 to 39-inch, and then the yellow and green are less than 6-inch, whether they're a sapling or just a little seedling. So you can see, in general, the distribution and abundance of the trees at the two sites here. Here, very similarly, is the same base map with the same point data, but touching on the health index scoring that we looked at. And here, what really jumps out at you is the mortality at Pacheco Creek, which will, you know, we speculate on in the report, and we can discuss that in just a moment. And then particular pathogen incidence of that we were keyed in on here in the anthracnose. You can see a very clear difference between the two sites. with an extremely high observance of incidents at Upper Coyote and much less so at Pacheco. What's interesting there is this, Upper Coyote is the natural system that we thought would be more resistant to this, which we'll speculate on briefly too. Sure.
Cognitive dissonance going on because of the slide before. You show clearly that Pacheco has a lot of mortality, yet you have this pathogen.
So the pathogen functions in a way, it's not lethal.
Okay.
So you can have, I've seen it up to 3 times in a single season. If you have a very wet spring, you can have it appear. It's like a fungus, a leaf fungus. It looks like kind of like powdery mildew, and it will shrink up the leaves, and it defoliates the tree. Then the tree responds and leaves out again, and then it can defoliate. And I've seen it happen 3 times in particular years. And then when it does finally leaf out and it's dry enough, and you don't have the moisture to support that pathogen, the tree will grow. It alters the growth form of the tree because of that, but it does not ever actually kill the tree.
Okay. Does the pathogen remain, or does that die off too once it dries out?
That's a great question, and it remains. And what we're really concerned about is, does it have an effect on natural regeneration?
Okay.
Once a tree has matured, it is able to withstand this particular pathogen. But what type of an effect is that having on regeneration patterns is a big question.
So you say once the tree matures, so even if this pathogen occurs on a much younger tree, or even a sapling, can it happen? Can a sapling actually be affected by this?
That's what one of the big questions we're trying to answer. At what stage could it potentially kill the tree? If it gets up in a single growing season and is able to, establish to that point, it probably is able to withstand, this particular pathogen, but we don't really know that point at this time. So it's a question for us. So we did a very, very simple look at hydrologic model, and all this was trying to accomplish was, under different flood events, so discharge, what landforms are inundated at each of the sites. This could be improved upon in a number of ways. However, what we did take from this is, not unfortunately, it is the way we ran it. The 2 larger discharges here are a 10-year and a 50-year. This past winter is estimated to be about a 25-year event, is what we've been hearing from most folks. So that'd be in between the 2 higher events here, but we did see at Pacheco evidence of the entire floodplain being inundated, which would match this essentially. And at Upper Coyote, we did see this upper floodplain. There was evidence that this was not inundated. So it does match here to a degree. The main thing that this can be misleading with this Upper Coyote figure is the historic channel. That definitely conveyed water this year. This model doesn't take into account transmissivity of the alluvium there and flow pathways upstream of the particular point we took this data at. So again, it's just a simple look at what was inundated at different events, and with limited data behind that. So regeneration at the different sites. We saw seed set at both sites. We saw root crown sprouting at both sites. At Pacheco Creek, we saw some regeneration of seedlings and saplings, so new growth. There were 19 little seedlings and 38 saplings. At Upper Coyote, we saw 1 seedling and 1 sapling. So, for a number of probable reasons, which we'll talk about in a minute. So just to quickly step back to the hypotheses that we had put together at the beginning with distribution. At the Pacheco Creek site, the green checks mean that it was in line with what we hypothesized there, younger trees closer to the channel, and as you got further away on higher, older landforms, you had older trees. At Upper Coyote, it wasn't that it didn't show that trend, it was mixed results. We saw different age classes kind of in different locations, and it was probably simply very likely because of historic channel across that land, or across that floodplain. So, in regards to health of the trees, for the live trees, we did not see a substantial difference between these scorings of the health and vigor that we had for the trees. Of course, with mortality, as we saw, there was substantially higher mortality at the Pacheco Creek site, which is what we had hypothesized. But then again, you touch on the pathogen anthracnose. That was the exact opposite of what we had hypothesized. Now, why are these happening? With mortality at Pacheco being much higher, it could be due to the management of the system and the groundwater levels being altered, not only by a reservoir, altering a natural hydrograph there, but groundwater extraction. That we know there's wells there. There's multiple landowners around the area. There's BLM, there's Caltrans, and then there's a lot of private land. It's cattle land, and there's people extracting water there. That could be one of the reasons why that's occurring. In regards to anthracnose being so much more prevalent up in Upper Coyote, that is harder to speculate on, but one thing it could be is that it's a different microclimate. It's a canyon setting. It's probably cooler up there throughout a longer period in the spring and there's probably higher humidity in that kind of a protected environment. So that could be playing a role with why that was occurring. In regards to regeneration, as I mentioned, the new growth from the youngest of the regenerating class, it was the opposite of what we expected. Now at Upper Coyote, it could be due to the presence of unrestricted cattle grazing. However, there's cattle at Pacheco as well. So we're not really sure what the intensity of grazing is at the two different sites, but there was definitely sign and evidence of them being there. For root crown sprouting and seed production, as I mentioned, it was pretty prevalent at both sites, and there wasn't enough of a difference between them to, support our original hypothesis on those. So again, there's other information. I don't want to take your entire evening, in the report on some of the data that we've been collecting, and just based on what I presented here, though, what is the take home here is like, well, it's a mixed bag. There's more questions than answers at this point, but we do feel that there's some good information that comes out of this, and one of our main goals again being to try to start to build a foundation to work off of. We do feel that we've moved toward accomplishing that goal. So with what we've figured out so far, some ideas we have for restoration and management recommendations would be, for example, simply planting along these inner channel geomorphic zones where you naturally see some of the younger trees on the landscape. And what is not supported by our simple experiment or study here is that a purely natural hydrograph is necessary, given that we have a quote managed system at Pacheco. However, it seems pretty clear that some flooding is likely required. So one of the ideas would be in a managed system, maybe you could do pulsed flows to kind of mimic a more natural environment and get some flooding of the different floodplain settings. With grazing, cattle are a extremely important tool for land management, and not trying to take them off the land at all, by no means. You can use them. However, we are seeing that, there was likely impacts from the cattle, and it's not necessarily always direct grazing, because from what I've learned from a number of ranchers is that sycamores really aren't that palatable for cattle. However, late in the season, they eat what's available. It's more that they can come in and trample in the areas where the new young seedlings are emerging. And so could consider some exclusionary fencing, which I know is, more and more common to protect riparian corridors. So another idea. And then in regards to the ability to have healthy plant material to outplant for restoration projects, working toward improving propagation techniques so that we have the best available materials to be outplanting, and knowing that they're pure genetic stock and not hybridized. So what are we doing right now to try to build off of this? First, we've been working with UC Davis, a genetics lab there, where we collected plant materials from 5 different stands of sycamore, including these 2 from this study. They extracted DNA. We also collected from known London plane trees in urban settings. They extracted DNA from all the materials we brought to them, and we have just a couple weeks ago got the results of this, and it's a very clear distinction between London plane DNA and the California sycamore DNA, and there's only a few interlying ones that are considered hybrids. So a lot of the trees at both of these sites are pure California sycamores. There are a few that the only ones that we saw that were hybrids, there were 3 or 4, were at Pacheco. What we have learned is that there was a Caltrans mitigation project there in the past, and they planted sycamore. They potentially outplanted hybrids, is what we think may have occurred there. So there's going to be a report that we're in the process of preparing about this genetic study, which of course we'll be sharing with the agency, so you all will have that. It's probably 2 or 3 months out, dealing with academics at UC Davis. It takes a little bit more time to get through that. We're actively conducting a propagation study with 2 native plant nurseries, the Watershed Nursery in the East Bay, and then Grassroots Ecology in Los Altos Hills, who used to be Acterra. We collected in the end of March cuttings from 4 different locations, including these 2 study sites. That photograph I showed earlier is some of those cuttings in one of the nurseries right now. So this is our first collection. We have a fall collection this year, and then we have a spring and fall collection next year. So it's about a 2.5-year study where we're taking different types of cuttings, processing them in different ways, and then planting them in the nurseries to see what kind of rooting we can get from those. There will also be a report in the future about that, and of course I'll be updating Ed and Tara along the way on how this is going. HT Harvey is working with SFEI right now to prepare a pilot restoration design for a project that can be implemented as soon as we get enough of the additional information we need to feel comfortable to actually outplant genetically pure plant material. So we want that in place so it's ready to go, and so we're preparing that now. And then finally, we're just in the preliminary planning and thought process of a cattle exclusion study where we could do some plots. I've been discussing it with Ed and Tara, but also with Open Space Authority. And the Open Space Authority has told us, yeah, we can do this up at the Upper Coyote site. Our idea would be to do rectangular plots that would be perpendicular to the channel so we could capture different geomorphic settings. Ideally, we do it immediately to capture the condition we have been presented because of this last winter, where we have fresh new alluvial sediments laid out. And however, funding is a barrier for us right now, and so I'm not sure it's going to be able to happen this year, but we're actively searching for funding to implement that, and hopefully on some of the other properties as well. So, not to leave out the important goal for the Habitat Agency, we also did a reconnaissance across South County to identify additional areas where acquisition and restoration of sycamore alluvial woodland could be considered. I'm not saying that all these green polygons on here are textbook sycamore alluvial woodland, but sycamores are at least a co-dominant of the riparian community in these locations, so there should be up for consideration. And yeah, that's that. Any questions? Yep.
This grazing exclusion, I mean, I'm sure that's a wonderful idea. But do we know, I mean, if there is an issue with herbivores, I mean, we wouldn't necessarily know that we wouldn't necessarily want to accuse cows necessarily, right? I mean, it could be deer, it could be pigs. I mean, I'm not sure whether you have evidence of pigs, or whether we know anything about, kind of the size of the other mammal populations.
Right.
In those areas.
Right, and there's also the smaller,
like
ones like rabbits.
Yeah.
Like we have a tremendous issue with rabbits on Lower Coyote Creek coming after our site. So, yeah, that's a great question. How we design our fencing, height, type, you put chicken wire style or smaller diameter or welded wire on the bottoms to keep rodents even. We've had voles kill big oak trees, relative. So it's an undertaking, and it's not just cattle.
Right. Yeah. So you're looking at the kind of the range of possibilities, and fencing that'll kind of hopefully do the job for anything.
Yeah, and pigs are a huge problem at Grant Park, as you probably know, being on the Park Commission.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Big problem, we're not doing anything about it.
Correct, yeah, and that's another complicated that I won't get into. But, so one of the things we're trying to do out at Grant is reestablish some sycamore alluvial in the San Felipe Creek Restoration Project that Tara referred to. And the biggest challenge there is not cows, it's pigs.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and them destroying what we plant. So we're going to have to fence off all the areas that we're going to put new plants in. Yeah, the thing with the cows is just working with the rancher to come up with a kind of a solution if cows are a variable that's affecting a plant community, and just working with the rancher, a win-win solution.
Yeah, the thing about the cows and the palatability of sycamore, it kind of makes you wonder whether that's a general mammal preference, or there's mammal defenses with the sycamores, or.
I'm sure it's a timing palatability of the leaves. So. But do you think your fences, are you putting them in the river? No?
Our current thought would be not
Okay,
crossing the
yeah.
river, and even making them temporary so that we can remove for winter. Otherwise, you're just going to be catching flood debris and everything.
So electric fences then, probably.
Okay, we've thought through to a degree use of electric fences. Yeah.
On both sites, are they both owned by public or private?
Well, the Habitat go ahead.
Yeah, so the one is Caltrans, and they're donating the property to us, the Pacheco site. It's 55 acres.
Okay.
And the other one is
Upper
OSA,
Coyote
right?
is Santa Clara Valley
yeah.
Open Space
Open
Authority.
space, yeah.
Yeah, who's supported this whole project.
Ed Binsker, just to help me understand, were the sycamores listed as some of the species within the Habitat Conservation?
No, it's not.
Can we do anything? Can we fund money for that?
Yes,
It's not a listed species under the HCP?
yeah, it's, we're also implementing an NCCP, and it's one of the habitat types in the plan that we have to protect for take reasons. So mainly water district projects, but some county public works projects and VTA projects will affect Sycamore alluvial. And we have to protect so many of the existing stands as mitigation, and we have to restore, as Matt mentioned, 14 acres as above and beyond, which is what the NCCP is about. Yeah, it's a great question, Dick, because given what Matt said, I'm surprised it's probably a species of concern, right? I'm guessing by the state. But
The habitat
yeah,
is.
the habitat, yeah. But given the threats that it's under and just the decline in the habitat itself and the tree in particular, I'm surprised it's not a candidate species or a listed species. But owls aren't either, and they're in decline throughout the state. Tricolored is even more shocking why it's not listed. So, but yeah, it's a great question. But yeah, we have to do something because the plan is this very dogmatic black and white document that says you must do this. So unless we amend it.
This doesn't answer that specific question, but it's kind of linked. The propagation and genetics studies that I mentioned that we're now doing, a lot of that funding is coming through the Water District because on their Upper Yagas Creek flood control project that Harvey's involved with design and permitting for that, the regulatory agencies are requiring those two studies. They initially said, you can't impact any sycamores. And there's sporadic, there's sycamores along Yagas Creek. And so we helped the Water District come up with this approach of, hey, let's do these studies so that we can, take the right steps toward actually mitigating for the impacts to the sycamore and have a chance of actually restoring sycamore to be part of that riparian community. So this is now, those two studies are linked to permit requirements that the Water District has. So it's going that route.
And that project's not covered by the plan, but
So are you saying that the study that you're doing is not funded by the Habitat Agency?
This study, the Habitat Agency provided support. It was a LAG grant. So we came to Ed at the time to support the effort. So we have not only the Habitat Agency, but the Water District and OSA and everybody. So Ed provided some matching funds for it, and then also some in-kind labor with an ICF individual who helped come and do some of the data collection.
My second bigger question is, these alluvial sycamore habitats have been around for a long time. Nobody's done, HC Harvey does good work, I understand that. And you're doing a lot of very good basic research. I can't believe nobody hadn't done this before. Are you saying that in the literature, nobody's done this type of stuff?
Very little.
Really? Okay, it just seemed like there's a lot of duplication here, but I guess I'm surprised that there's that much that's not been done and you're having to do a lot of pretty basic original stuff. I mean, comparison of controlled and non-controlled. It seemed like somebody, well, okay, if you say so, I'm just surprised.
Yeah, and again, during that early process of figuring out what are the questions we should ask here that are going to be most helpful. And I hear what you're saying. These are very simple questions that you're asking.
Yeah, well, that's what strikes me.
And that's where we're like, wow, the literature is not showing that there's a lot of these very simple questions that have been thought through. So we got to start at that level so we can start to build this foundation to work off of.
Okay,
So,
okay.
yeah, we were surprised too when we really dove into it. We're like, hasn't anybody been thinking about this?
That's a great question,
So-
Craig. Yeah.
Surprising.
Yeah, but a lot of these things aren't sexy in science. I mean,
Okay.
there's probably millions of studies on Kit Fox, but, yeah.
And that plane tree that you were talking about, that's the, reminded me to take my vitamins, sorry. That's the urban sycamore tree that we see in your yard. And is that a real sycamore?
No. Well, it's a horticultural variety.
Oh, geez, okay. I knew it wasn't the same as what we have here, but I didn't know
Right.
it was that different. Okay, that's all.
And I mean, that's part of the question we want to figure out.
I heard you say.
We're talking with Ed about is trying to get another grant to work with a lot of our wildlife biologists at Harvey to see, okay, maybe there are a bunch of these hybrids out on the landscape. What's the functionality difference between them and native sycamore? Is there any? We don't know. It's another one of those pretty simple questions that nobody's looked into because they haven't thought about it.
Edmund, I have just one other hypothetical question. If you take the project that Julie talked about, the one up the canyons up in San Jose, that the San Jose is not excited about, whether they want to do high-end homes way up the canyon. Let's say there was a sycamore grove up on that piece of property. Could that developer say, I'm paying the HCP fee, so I don't have to now do anything about the sycamore trees that are up on that there? Or are they?
Correct. We have a cap on the number of acres that can be taken in 50 years. But yes, as long as we're not above that cap, that developer or that private project proponent can, quote unquote, take those trees, yes.
With permission.
But those fees are high with the goal of, and the private sector gets this sometimes better than the public sector, is avoid and minimize. You know, you deal with it with the water boards all the time. So the fees are high to discourage take of that type of habitat.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. Dick, I just wanted to follow up. Did you feel your first question was answered? Because it looks like you've partnered before, and the funding you're looking for now is sort of going down that same path with a lag grant. Is that it? Or and you're looking with other partners?
Yes, yes. And as Matt alluded to, the water district is one of the biggest.
Yeah.
But but when it comes to doing restoration, we definitely want to work with them once we start acquiring some sites. And I was telling Matt that in the presentation I'll tell you a little bit about El Toro Ranch, but I should say Rancho El Toro. But there was sycamore alluvial riparian above that dam, the Pacheco Dam, and that nobody was aware of. So I'm sure there's more of it, hopefully, out there. Sargent Ranch has quite a bit, but I think that has showed up on Matt's map. So if those sites are acquired by us or somebody else, we would like to work to enhance those sites, protect them, and restore them. Yep.
Do the members have any other questions?
Yeah, just one quick. I've heard the term lag grant a number of times. I don't really know what a lag grant is.
Sorry, it's through the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. It's called a Local Assistance Grant,
Okay.
and it's available for areas that have an NCCP in place.
Okay. That answer that?
Yeah, Stu's work on that nitrogen in the creeks is funded by this, too.
So if there are no more questions, then I was remiss last time around to ask if there was public comment on the last presentation and then on this one. So Doug, I'm sorry. I apologize. No questions?
I have learned to be a little more assertive than I was 5 years ago, so.
You know, you can always butt in when it comes to me. All right, thank you. All right, so we're ready to move on to the next one. Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Matt.
Yes, thanks for coming all the way down, suffering with our traffic. Okay, so I think it is time for the budget. Is that it? What was that? Oh, no, the fees.
yes,
I'm sorry.
fees.
Fees, yes.
And these are just a review of the mitigation fees imposed upon new public and private development within the boundaries of the plan area for fiscal year 17-18. And these are automatic increases based on the housing index and the CPI. And for what's important for the PAC is Exhibit A and Exhibit B. A is the fees that'll go up in July 1st. And Exhibit B is the report prepared by Robert Spencer of Urban Economics and sort of the rationale and the mathematics behind the fee increase. And trying to think if there's anything else that's very relevant about this. Oh, we do have a policy that if somebody pays their fees now, they can pull their grading permit a year from that date. And so let's say you pay your fees today and you do your grading work in August, you'll be locked into this fiscal year's fee increase. And that's something that we did, save a little bit of money.
And if you don't start within a year, then you forfeit the fee or just pay the increase?
You pay the increase, yep. Mhm.
Pay the increase.
Yes.
Any questions?
And what page are the fees on? I don't have the fees in front of me.
Oh,
unless
so,
you
yeah,
tell me
page
the
34, sorry. 34.
Thank you.
And the report begins on page 35. Sorry about that. And this was more of a FYI to let you guys know. Yeah, and the
Right.
board, we have gone to the board the last couple years, even though they're an automatic increase, and the board said, stop coming to us, so. But we'll still come to you guys and let you know about it.
But I believe in this report, you make mention of the 5-year review.
Yes,
So,
and that's coming up next
so
year.
they're just going to have to suck it up
Yeah,
next year.
yeah,
Just
exactly,
have to cover it
exactly.
anyway.
Good point, I forgot about that. Sorry, guys. So up next is the budget, and what I'll do is give you the presentation I gave at the budget workshop. A few things have been tweaked. And of note in the, and I'll get this right this time, is, let's see, what page would that be? So beginning on page 55, is that correct? Yeah. These are the appropriations, and we, you'll see what the budget request was, what the estimated actual will be, and then the budget request for next fiscal year. And I'll get into details on that, and if you have any specific questions on any of the appropriations, I can address those. And then on revenues are on, let's see what page that is, I forget where these are. 54. And I'll get into that too when I'm doing the presentation. And please interrupt me if you have any questions, and I'll address them. We're informal. Okay. So we'll go over some of the accomplishments of this past year, goals and objectives for next fiscal year, and then we'll do a summary of the budget. The overview. So it's broke it down into program management, land acquisition, management and monitoring, restoration. I'm going to go through some of this stuff quickly because Tara did a great job going over a lot of this already. There is a little bit of difference because I'm sort of 1 year ahead of Tara, so the annual report's always 1 year behind. And then the regional general permit. So with program management, we have our board meetings, we have the PAC meetings, the stakeholder groups. That's one of the most important things we do. We interact with, we are a player in the planning and conservation arena, and we talk with the development community, the environmental community, and government and entities all the time. The plan is not as dynamic of a document as a general plan would be for a city or a county, or a strategic plan for somebody like the water district or a capital plan. But there is things where we have to modify. We write plan interpretation and clarification memos and we just wrote a bunch on the plans, and we're still working through that. And when those are finally agreed upon by all parties, they end up on our webpage. We also do permit compliance and annual report. You heard that, the first stage of that today. We also do these things in mitigation-only agreements, and we've done them primarily with Caltrans. We did one with PG&E, where those were projects that happened in the plan area before the plan was adopted. They had BOs, and they never officially mitigated their project. They had a BO where they had an impact on 8 acres of tiger salamander habitat, and they mitigate through the plan, so they pay our fees. We'll buy land for them. We'll manage that land in perpetuity. It won't be a system, but we're essentially mitigating. We're implementing their mitigation locally, and those have to be approved by the wildlife agencies for that to happen. And we negotiated 2 of those this year with Caltrans. We just completed a land management cost share agreement with OSA for Coyote Ridge. Who's going to do what? We're creating a 501c3 for the endowment investment, and we're going to invest our endowment in the Silicon Valley Land Conservancy. Excuse me, yeah, sorry, yes. Yeah, I'm reading my slide without,
Wow.
I'm just a robot, yes, yes. Craig just got a lot richer. So yeah, with the community, the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. And we were one of the folks that Craig and his board members met with to figure out what do we want to evolve into. And we had a couple really great meetings with them. And we're very excited, that they're, I think that's a good fit, partnering with the Farm Bureau. Yep.
Going to get a full update on that for everyone, where that is going or where that's going to be.
Yeah, I will leave that up to Craig.
You're on the August agenda, FYI.
Don't hold your breath, because I will be gone by then, so.
But I could have someone from the Silicon Valley Land Conservancy or possibly this new name come here and give you an update on that.
Sure.
Maybe jointly with Jess, if that's the direction they're going to go. We're always doing training for San Jose, and it's a very positive thing. I don't mean to sound derisive, but there's a lot of turnover there, and we have another training scheduled with their staff. So I'm not going to, this kind of goes over the public outreach, which includes lobbying and working. We're trying to create legislative champions locally, and been working with Julie and OSA to do that. And we got the language to the RCIS bill changed to be more protective of NCCPs. We're trying to do the same thing with SB1, that if you are going to do advanced mitigation, that's the transportation bill you guys have probably been hearing about. If you are going to be doing advanced mitigation, coordinate with the local NCCP. It's a pretty basic thing. And if your project can be covered by the NCCP, that's the way you should go. Helps us, helps you, you get your permit. Tara mentioned the straw program. For those of you not familiar with the straw program, it's Point Blue. We used to be Point Reyes Bird Observatory. They work with local schools, many in disadvantaged communities, and they do restoration projects. And if it's something that I think potentially working with a farmer, a rancher in the Farm Bureau. I went out there one day with my daughter, and there was a school from Hollister that I worked with, and Tara was out there another day, and it was amazing. I said, okay, 3rd and 4th graders, restoration program. They do a great job training them, and I was super impressed. It's why we do this work, and it was very inspirational for me to be there, and I was really impressed how Point Blue implements it. So with program management, it's sort of the basics. We did an audit, and everything was okay. We did another AB 1600 report, where we set up a safe harbor. The agency, in the infancy of growing, we didn't have a safe harbor 401k program, which put the agency at risk of violating IRS rules, as I found out. So we now have that. We will be hiring a CPA to advise us and oversee fiscal functions. We're going to start doing this stuff in-house. We had been doing it with the county. I think we're ready to fly out of the nest and do our own stuff, and we'll save money in the process. We'll be developing in-house payroll function. We've had a lot of problems with private payroll companies. I won't name them here and shame them, but it was pretty astounding, the incompetency and the misinformation that was sent our way. This is where the discrepancies, and I'll talk a little bit about this. So we're projecting $14.5 million in grant funding, and I'm calling it grant, but it's also other. That includes PG&E working with us as, and I'm not here to promote their HCP. I realize there's some issues with it, and hopefully they'll be able to work through that with the environmental community and others that have commented on it. But one positive thing that's coming out of it, they are going to work with the local NCCP, HCPs, us and East Contra Costa and Solano are the 3 in the Bay Area. And they, so of that 14.5 million, they earmarked 5.5 to collaborate with us on acquisitions for advanced mitigation for their Bay Area HCP. It also represents money from the Bureau of Rec, Section 6 grant. Moore Foundation has committed funding for Richmond Ranch, which I'll talk about that in a second, and El Toro. So that number is very different than the number that Tara talked to you about. And we had projected we'd have 3.1 million in grants. So that's one area that at least this year we were very successful in getting other organizations and grant funds, and Tara wrote a couple of the grants. And so this is our first year of sort of working sort of on our own to try to go out and get funding.
Can I stop you there
Yes.
for a minute? I don't want to belabor the point. I just want to understand clearly. So everything that you just talked about with around PG&E, I just want to understand. I understand it's advanced mitigation.
Yeah.
But is it that they are, because it seems to me I'm getting the difference between what's grant funding and what's
Yes.
advanced mitigation. Advanced mitigation, they're paying you. They're being
Yes.
able to say, look, we've already got that covered.
Correct.
But then there's grant funding. That's a whole other
Correct.
kettle of fish.
Correct. Yep. So the grant funding is, and I may miss a couple of these, so $3 million from WCB as a match to our Section 6 grant, which was $2 million. Moore Foundation, I don't want to get ahead of their board, but we're looking at a sizable contribution for the Rancho El Toro if we're fortunate enough to acquire it. They were also, were going to assist us on the Richmond Ranch acquisition. But I'll get into this a little bit more later, but we aren't going to get Richmond Ranch, so unfortunately. TNC is, and again, I don't want to get ahead of their board, they're going to be a funding partner on Rancho El Toro. We're hopeful that the Water District is going to participate in one or more of these. OSA is committed, they were committed to helping out on Richmond. They're also committed to helping on the rest of UTC, which we're in negotiations with the Pratt & Whitney Corporation on that one. We got 2 Bureau of Rec grants. One went, Tara wrote the grant, but it was, she was very strategic about this because OSA applied for the fencing grant, and her and OSA worked together to put that grant together. And then we also did one for land acquisitions. So we got $800,000 or close to $900,000 for the fencing for all the properties on Coyote Ridge, the Water District, VTA.
So
And-
I'm understanding that, I guess,
Yeah.
there's 3 things, or 2 things. So the PG&E thing is a different bucket.
Correct.
It's not a grant.
Correct,
All
it's
right,
not a
'cause
grant.
It seems kind of mushed in together
Yeah.
when you're talking about it. And then the other thing I wanted to know, just generally, as we talk about this, how do you foresee any changes, because you talked about the Bureau of Rec, land management, sorry. Do you foresee any changes in federal funding, given this administration's viewpoint on certain things?
Yes, I do. How it affects us, it's a little hard to say. There's Republican support for the Section 6 program. There's a Calvert, congressman from Riverside County. West Riverside has both the Coachella Valley and West Riverside have HCP and CCPs. And he's very supportive of continuing funding of the Section 6 program. Congressman Hunter wrote a letter of support for the Section 6 program, just to give you a sense.
So
Yeah.
you're not sure, but you're not discounting that there will be?
Yes,
So,
yeah. What I see happening potentially, if there is staff cuts, then right now we have a person assigned to our program from the Fish and Wildlife Service that works with us very closely, and we have a great turnaround time because of his dedication to working with us to implement the plan. So I see that as a potential if they suffer through a lot of staff cuts. I know a lot of the developers are concerned about this. If these organizations, agencies suffer staff cuts, how are they going to get their permits to do their projects? The Bureau of Rec, I don't know, so that's kind of a mystery. Tara talked to them the other day, and the funding is going to be a little bit delayed in when they originally thought they would be able to give us to it. But it's still, from what we understand, it's still earmarked, and no one's talking about cutting it off. Could that change? Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, California, the Sacramento, the Assembly and the Senate are battling President Trump over policies, and so I don't know how that could play out. You know, would there be some sort of payback for California? It's hard to say. I mean, a lot of California is I mean, it's a red state within a blue state, the Central Valley, parts of Southern California. So it's hard to say how it'll all play out. Silicon Valley is really important for the economy of the nation. So
we'll see. So it's a
Yeah.
wait and see. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. No, I've just been on
yeah,
some.
no, I'm glad you asked.
Organizations, some agencies
Yes.
that have said, we just can't count on it anymore, and
Yeah,
others.
look at Caltrain.
Yeah.
You know, who knew that would happen? So,
Although, the latest word is
oh, they're going to get it?
it looks that
Okay.
way. They will get it
Okay.
for electrification.
Okay.
Like there's been a switch again. We'll
Okay.
see. We'll see.
And John Hopkins, who's our California Coalition, he sent an email out, and Fish and Wildlife Services budget went up at least by 11 million for at least till September. Yeah. So in the near future, it's okay. Long term, hard to say. This is one area where we're way off. We thought we'd get about 12 million. And there's these two big projects in San Jose, which we were assured that they would come in, and they're not coming in. San Jose did a much better job of sitting down with us and going over it and understanding their own projects and saying, well, these are going to be phased, and that's never what they told us. And so I think our revenue projections for next year are going to be not this wonky.
More realistic, in other words.
More realistic, yeah. So it's more of an art in some ways, trying to predict these public and private projects and the funding and when they're going to happen. I mentioned the Community Foundation. So these are some other things we worked on. We're trying to work on a nitrogen deposition fee threshold analysis and guidance for projects less than 2 acres. Because it's come to our attention, we're not collecting enough nitrogen fees, and there's a lot of projects happening in San Jose that are these skyscrapers that are not paying nitrogen fees, and we're in discussions with the city about a house in the county, one house getting built has to pay the nitrogen fee. And you can argue vehicle miles traveled as an issue, but then you get a 40-story building or a 30-story building in San Jose being built, not paying the fees. So we're working through that. One of the concerns of the Public Works was that they build bridges that'll take 2 or 3 seasons, and they have to dewater streams over 3 seasons. So we worked with the wildlife agencies to call this a temporary impact. Because if it was happening in 1 season per the plan, 1 year, they would pay temporary. But given it's staggered over 2 or 3 years, as long as they don't exceed 365 days of activities in the stream, then and they can restore it after that, then we worked with the wildlife agencies for dewatering projects that was a big deal for the Public Works people.
Yeah.
And I mentioned the plant memos, which the plant stuff, and everybody realizes this, is in the mad dash to get the plan approved, there were things that were left kind of undone or sloppily put together, and this is one of the things that we're working on.
Did you say mad dash? 7 years?
And
7? Was it 7?
Talk to others who've been
Yeah.
at it for what, like almost 2
Yeah.
decades trying
Well,
to get one?
it's crazy. It took, 9 years? I mean, Ken,
9, I guess,
yeah.
yeah.
But at the end, it's like the Army, right? Hurry up and wait. So, so it was, it took 9 years, but then everybody wanted it all done. So we now have including myself, 4 full-time and 1 half-time person. And these are sort of the various things we do and who does them. And I can go over this if you like, or I can just, but it kind of lays out that we do have some contracts with county parks, and we're still working with ICF, but we're starting to phase them out. Not completely, but just to let you know, my second year here, we had a contract with them. I guess it was for 14, 15. I think that would be it, or 15, yeah. Or was it for all? Yeah, whatever the time frame was for $930,000. This year will be under 300,000 working with ICF. So I've enjoyed working with them. They're a great company, but it's time to kind of sort of move on beyond just relying on consultants. So this is the land acquisition stuff, and and I'll get into this in detail. So I mentioned the Pacheco Creek property, and this is the property that Caltrans, the California Transportation Commission already approved the donation to us. Our governing board has to approve a resolution in June accepting the donation, and then it'll officially become our second property enrolled in the reserve system. We're negotiating wildlife agencies and county parks for enrolling Calero into the reserve system. It's taking a lot longer than any of us thought it would, unfortunately. Letters of intent were submitted, and we just got Rancho El Toro signed the letter of intent to move forward to sell us. We're doing an appraisal now, and hopefully we can agree on terms with them. It's a beautiful property. We will continue to do grazing out there. I don't know, Kyle, if you've ever been out there, or Jess, but it's really a beautiful property. It's 12,221 acres.
Is it appropriate for a PAC to have a tour of the property at
Absolutely.
sometime very soon?
Absolutely. So we're talking to the ranch family that owns that, and we'll see how it goes. And that's where some of that grant funding that I mentioned is coming from. Richmond, we always struggled with price on them. They had a very different idea of what their property was worth versus what the appraisal said. So we were always in that conundrum with them. We did increase our offer slightly above appraised value, and we were going to update the appraisal to sort of help justify that. But we were still a couple million short from the Chinese investors that are now in contract on the ranch. I don't know how that'll play out. I'm expecting them to buy it. I heard from our realtor that the patriarch of this investment group flew from China to see the property, and he liked it, and they're buying it. So you would, if they're buying it to develop it, good luck.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah. And the Richmonds may have fueled, unfortunately, some of the
Oh, I'm sure.
perceptions of development.
Yeah.
Because they kept telling us they could build 70 homes out there. And, yeah.
They keep pointing at Young Ranch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens with
Yeah.
Young Ranch and then.
So Rancho, keep your fingers crossed. It's 35 ponds out there. It's a beautiful property.
I'd like to just make a here, and this is with regards to your executive officer report as well, but especially something like this, which is is a public document. I'd really appreciate it in the future, if it's not too onerous, to have a map that, to some degree of specificity, points out the properties on the map.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That would be really
Yes.
great.
And I easily could have done that.
Yeah, that
Yes.
would be wonderful, thanks.
Yeah. In Richmond's at the intersection of Metcalf and San Felipe Road, just on the outskirts of San Jose, just southeast of Young Ranch. Rancho El Toro Bell Station, that's part of that property. The Bell Station parcel is not going to be sold off of Highway 152. It's that little farm market store of a Highway 152. It's not too far from the San Luis Reservoir or Casa de Fruta. The Pacheco property is pretty close to Casa de Fruta, again off of 152. And I'm sorry, I should have had a map in here.
Think they should do that, a map, or wait until they bought it? Well, I'm more concerned that it's on the internet and someone sees it and it's
Well, I
parkland
mean,
and I'm going for it.
He's clearly indicating to the public that they're in negotiations.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can find out if you want to where these places are. So I don't see if that we're not providing the public with something they could already find out, and that isn't already in wording right here.
And I did agendize it on a implementation governing board meeting
Okay.
a few months ago.
Yeah.
To let them know we started talking to the family. But yeah, I understand what you're saying, yep.
I'm not asking parcel specific? I'm asking general area specific.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, General. I'm next to Co Park and Fish and Game, and I had someone wave me down, and they were having, where they give kids the Fish and Game license.
Oh, yeah.
And the guy was asking me if I could go hunting over there. And I go, no, that's just closed. I go, are you going to go get your hunting license? He's all, no, I want to go hunting. I go, well, you just can't go, so,
Anywhere, yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah, no, I appreciate what your point, I really do.
And we've had negotiations with these other on Sargent Ranch, we're not the lead, it's Post and the Nature Conservancy, but we've been involved in it to some degree. The UTC, I'm cautiously optimistic we can pull that off with others. Well, it's too much for us to bite ourselves. So these are the organizations that we've solicited and hopefully will solicit money from. We've secured nearly 14 million in funding for land acquisitions. That's probably a better way to say it than grants.
And just to follow up to Kyle, because I want to be sensitive to what he said. Kyle, if you feel more comfortable with it, perhaps what could be done is we could be given a printout.
Yes.
And if you like, the printout can be collected after our meeting, unless it needs to be part of the public
Yeah, and
record,
it-
because
and-
it would have to be part of the public record, yeah, so.
And it is something, I wish Valerie was here for this question, but maybe Angie can add. I don't know how closed sessions work with public advisory committees. I don't know if they can do that.
Yeah, yeah. It's not the end of the world, I would, it's
Yeah.
just, because then I have to go looking up that
Right.
stuff on my own time, just to go, exactly
Yeah.
where is it, so.
You could also maybe color code it for what you're in negotiations for and, you know,
Yeah.
some other way.
We could do a dot on a map, which
Right.
wouldn't hurt.
No, exactly, I wouldn't want to be parcel specific, I just want to have enough detail to know that,
and,
okay.
and I apologize. I thought about bringing, Tara can verify this, I thought about bringing a map today, but it still wouldn't have showed you the Richmond property, because I view that as sort of,
It's gone,
it's gone.
yeah. Okay, all right. There you go, problem solved.
Problem solved. You think as a planner, I would know to bring a map. So, I mentioned the management plan, the draft, this is the management plan, that's right, there was the cost share agreement. This is the management and monitoring plan for Coyote Ridge Open Space Preserve. So sort of our draft is done, and we're in the process of, and we will be submitting it to OSA soon for their review, and then on to the wildlife agencies. So we did a floristic assessment of Calero Park. We did that on Coyote Ridge last year, and that gave you all those numbers that Tara shared with you, the 27.5 million Lysingea. We're now doing that out at Calero. We've done this past fiscal year, we did amphibian surveys at Calero Park, Lamont, and Richmond Ranch. And the ones at Lamont and Richmond Ranch were done for PG&E paid for those because of they're only doing an HCP and an incidental take permit through the state. So to mitigate for California tiger salamander, it's a pretty rigorous process the DFW puts an applicant through. So as part of that, at least we got a good idea what's out at Lamont and Richmond. And there were no bullfrogs or non-native fish on the Richmond Ranch site. So that's another downer. Not being able to secure that. And Tara talked about the Coyote Ceanothus creation project. So western burrowing owl, yes, this is our species that we focus the most on because it's the one most at risk. And we have a group interdisciplinary group made up of scientists, land managers, government agencies, and it's really a good mix of people that are involved with that. And we had an experts workshop to inform the conservation strategy, and because as some of you know, but I can explain this, you know, there's these different tiers. We have 3 tiers to implementing the burrowing owl program: Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Tier 2 is a lot of the survey work, the management agreements. Tier 3 is much more aggressive actions to try to save the birds, including captive breeding, translocation. So that's a lot of the stuff we talked about at the workshop. We did a fee zone update. Tara talked about the San Jose regional facility and their acres now under management agreement. We did we worked with a private entity in El Viso called Steel Wave, and it's part of the landfills out there that were set aside as mitigation for burrowing owls, and we worked with them to create more artificial burrows and to get them to change their mowing regime. That's something we can't count towards the acres because we don't have a management agreement with them. And through their CEQA document, they're responsible for doing a lot of this stuff. But at least and they were great to work with. They listened to everything that Kay Lasha works for us, and Shawnee from Audubon and I suggested they do. And it was really Shawnee from Audubon that brought them to us. And I mentioned Moffett. That's kind of an important one. Mountain View is exploring possibly becoming a co-permittee. I don't know how that'll play out. So they would enroll their landfill into our reserve system and probably parts of the golf course. So that would be a very positive thing because that's where the owls are. The Calero project, I'll just show you some pictures of it. This is construction. This is the top picture is a before. Well, we put a lot of good grazing infrastructure in there. We put some troughs. We worked closely with the leasee out there and county parks to make sure we were doing things that were compatible for the grazer. And this is the wetland before and after. And there's also a trough. You can barely see it at the far end of the picture, but we got a little drainage area that goes into a trough.
From the main entrance to Calero, where exactly?
This is the Rancho San Vicente that, you know, is not open to the park, to the public yet. So it's that.
Rancho San Vicente.
Yeah.
That's going to be called Calero Park?
Yeah, from what I understand, yeah.
No wonder I couldn't figure it
Yeah.
out, okay.
But,
I
yes.
was going to go check it out. But
Yeah, and again, when's the open? June 2nd.
Okay. We'll get a notification about that, right?
And we just found out today there were CTS, again, found in both the
Oh.
wetland and there's pond turtle out there too.
In
And Mount
the
Hamilton
restored
District.
area already, or you
Yeah.
mean another?
Yep, there was,
Nice job.
well, thank you.
That was fast.
They won't all be this easy, but this one, but these two were. So the regional general permit, which was something very important for our co-permittees, we've developed an application form and submittal protocol. Advanced mitigation sites are Guadalupe River site in San Jose that they had extra mitigation credit available through a restoration project that the city of San Jose did. And then Calero Park, San Felipe Creek will also serve as a mitigation for the regional general permit. And the first project that went through the RGP was the Calero Park restoration. 4 RGP applications are being processed, including one here in Morgan Hill, the Watsonville Road one that Tara referred to. And she also mentioned the outfall structures in the city of San Jose. So this is that permit integration stuff that was very important to both the development community, the public entities, and the environmental community to try to have a comprehensive, coordinated, streamlined permitting. So we've got that done. We're working on integrating the 401. We've had some very productive meetings with the 2 regional boards. We'll see how it goes. They're reluctant to have a comprehensive, programmatic 401 cert, but we're thinking we can get them to agree to some sort of streamlining process where certain projects would get the 401 cert automatically, others they would review, and others they would and agree to like a short time frame, and then still others that would have an expedited time frame, but probably longer than 45 days. So one thing we didn't do with the regional general permit is that was develop a in lieu fee. So really the Habitat plan is an in lieu fee program. We collect fees, and then later on we go out and buy land, and that's why there's that we're a little bit off on some of the stay ahead, and we're way ahead in others because you collect fees, you buy properties, and over 50 years it'll hopefully all come out in the wash. So we're working with the Army Corps is the lead on this group called the Interagency Review Team, and mitigation banks go through this process, and we're setting up an in lieu fee program to link up with the program we have with the endangered species permitting. So we won't have to do advanced mitigation. So right now we're rushing to get projects done in advance of projects coming in, and we won't have to be on that hamster wheel anymore once that's approved. And the meeting went very well from what I understand. So goals and objectives for next year, you can cross out Richmond. But hopefully Rancho El Toro and possibly UTC, who knows. Calero, Moffett I mentioned, we had a really productive meeting with Google, so I think they're a big player out there. I should call them Alphabet, right? So Tara mentioned San Felipe Creek and starting construction. She mentioned the ponds on Coyote Ridge, and we want to get our 501c3 up and running before we can start investing in the endowment. So the reason why we've gone with them is because of the local connection, the networking opportunities. They invest locally, and we thought it was a good idea versus going with NIFWIF, which is the national organization. That was, I always forget what they stand for, National Fish and Wildlife Federation or Foundation or something. They're a good organization, but we thought investing in a local community foundation was a better way to go. Both would have been comparable in terms of investment strategy. So we submitted another Section 6 grant. Hopefully we'll get that next year. Solicit funds from other places. Work with the NGO community. Hopefully through Silicon Valley we can link into some of these other foundations where we had some really good meetings with the Moore Foundation and developing good rapport with them. More local assistant grants. Keep working on the 401 cert and get that in lieu fee program further along. I think it'll probably take 18 months or so to get approval for that. Begin developing online interactive species monitoring database. We acquire more land, then that'll really kick in. Complete the amphibian and plant surveys at Calero, which is an easy thing to do. starting developing a 5-year budget projection to try to get a better handle on that, and execute an agreement for endowment investment services and management. So now we'll get into the numbers. And so this is, the first column here is what we projected 1670 would be. This is what we think it will be. And a big caveat on the grants. And we have to acquire property and to use them. If we don't acquire property, we won't be able to use that money. And it's sort of a moving pot depending on what property and who's investing, but that's a pretty accurate assessment of how much money. But if we don't acquire anything, say goodbye to most of that. This is what we're thinking for next year. So we had some very good conversations with the co-permittees, and this is where we think we'll be at, is about $5.5 million in revenues, about $4 million in grants. Part of that is reflecting that funding sources are becoming a little scarcer. And we're not going to have as many revenues. If we're successful buying Rancho El Toro and some of these other properties, we're going to be not as much of a player in the land acquisition business, at least until we build up our reserves again. And so we think revenues next year will be somewhere in the 9.5 million range between grants and fees. And revenues for this year, if you count those grants that are contingent upon buying property, is almost 19 million. And that's the revenue funding from the different sources that we're anticipating.
Ed,
Yes.
if you get that Rancho El Toro,
Yes.
are you guys keeping it, or are you selling it and putting a easement on it?
That's a great question. So one of the partners with us on it is TNC, and they have this grassland bank idea. I don't know if you've been hearing about that at all.
Yeah.
So we're kind of agreed to sort of implement that strategy with them on that. But we have talked to them about an end game, and there may be, it may be sold with an easement over it in the future, yes. It also may be given, the property given to OSA or to county parks.
That's what I was afraid of.
Yeah, yeah. But we tried to work with, TNC approached some of the big ranchers in the state to partner with us on it. And we were working with a private individual, couple of them, and where they'd be the lead and we put an easement, and they were going to graze it. But it got really wacky with the people we were working with, unfortunately, and they pulled out. And it was too expensive for most ranchers, the price. And because I know TNC talked to some of the, I can't name them, but I know you would know them all. Yeah. And I would be very happy to partner with a rancher on it and just put an easement over it. Yeah, I'd be more than satisfied with that. It'd be a good deal for us and good deal for the rancher. Yeah, but unfortunately, we couldn't find that partner. But it will be grazed. Yeah, that's for sure. So I can assure you that. So these are the appropriations. So the good news on this is that we're spending less than we thought we were going to spend. And the budget request is very similar to our original budget request in 16-17. And the big item there is the San Felipe Creek restoration. We've earmarked $1.5 million, not just for that, but also for the design work at Calero and some other projects. So that's in conservation strategy implementation. So that's the big one there. So we'll be submitting this to the governing board for their approval on June 15th of this year, and certainly welcome any input from the PAC on this. Thank you. Our favorite charismatic species. I should put the flower there. Do you have any questions? Plants? Plants are
We've got it earlier in there.
Yeah.
Questions?
I don't.
We have a speaker card for this item.
Oh, please step up, Doug.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee members and staff. For the record, my name is Doug Muirhead. I live in Morgan Hill. This is sort of a curiosity question. Not too long ago, I heard OSA staff saying that they were having problems acquiring some land because they, as a public agency, they couldn't offer more than the appraisal value. And if I heard correctly tonight, there was a piece of property where an offer was made that was a little greater than the appraisal value, and the appraisal was adjusted to support that. I hope I heard correctly. So my question is there any room to increase an offer above appraisals using some additional criteria like public benefit? And the other is there any interest at the state level through the Climate Action Plan, cap and trade, whatever, to try and also find some ways to have some additional flexibility? Or are you looking at a future where it's pretty much, if the owner likes his property better than the appraisal, you're going to have to walk away? So like I say, it's a curiosity question. Thank you.
Would you like me to address that? Sure.
Please.
As always, Doug, good question. So because there was a time lapse and there were some new comps, including one of the parcels of what was the Richmond Ranch sold, we could work with the appraiser to adjust the, honestly adjust the appraisal. And we have the ability to go a little bit above appraised value anyways, but 5 to 10% is usually the rule, but it is something that we don't advocate and would not do it as practice. As far as cap and trade goes, yes, we've tried to get the state to take a more expansive view of those funds and how those funds are allocated towards acquisition for carbon sequestration. They have a really good program with the counties and OSA are implementing, I think, a planning document, right, if I'm not mistaken, the SOC program, which works to protect primarily farmland,
Yeah,
but we're also saying, hey, rangeland is super important, and we argue even more important for carbon sequestration because you're not disrupting the soil, and a lot of carbon is held in the grasses and the soil, and so we're and in the desert environment too, which isn't us, but so we are trying to get the state to have a broader sort of interpretation of how those funds could be allocated for lands that are threatened for conversion as sort of the big criteria. But also, one thing that we bring is long-term management of lands. And if we are going to sequester carbon and manage it for carbon, that's one more thing that we could do to enhance the carbon sequestration of these lands. The state's part of the problem. The Department of General Services won't, so a lot of the funding for Richmond was going to be grant funding, and the Department of General Services will not, and a lot of these granting agencies won't sanction you paying over appraised value. So I think we were using, it's either $6 or $8 million, I forget, was coming from either state or federal sources, is 6, to buy Richmond. And it was being earmarked for the serpentine parcels, which were the parcels with the highest value. So the serpentine parcels were the ones that were appraised at the highest because of their scarcity and sort of just from a market standpoint, scarcity and valuation for conservation exceeded valuation for ranching or development, believe it or not, at least on those properties. So that helped us a little bit, but ultimately the appraisal was looking at the vast majority of Richmond Ranch as rangeland, and the Richmond family was looking at it as potential development land, even though county zoning won't let them do that, except what zoning allows. It won't let them exceed that. So that was the biggest challenge. There was no way to take those purely grassland acres and double them with a straight face, and it wasn't going to pass, unfortunately. And even if we tried, any of the properties we were using grant funds for, the state and the feds would have said, we will not fund that acquisition. And that's the conundrum we're in, because we are in such an expensive, still speculative, and it hurts the ranchers and the farmers, and it hurts us, and it makes it very difficult to try to pull these deals off. Thank you. You're welcome.
Can I add one piece to that?
Yes.
Having previously been on the board of the Open Space Authority and involved in land property, as Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story. And the rest of the story is when you pay above appraised value, now everybody else has to pay above appraised value. And so there's a lot of unspoken pressure from all the other groups to not do that. So even though you can legally do that, it sets a precedent that is not good, and it just raises the bar for everybody else. So just keep that in mind too.
So no question this time, so it's just your report.
Yeah, I'm going to be real brief because I figure you guys want to get home. But the California HCP Coalition had their annual meeting here. Craig was there, and I thought it was a great meeting. Yeah. And so we hosted it, so that's why it was so great, right?
Well, I wasn't surprised that you did such a good job. I just didn't know in general it was. But.
So I know 75 people registered. I think we had probably about 60, 65 showed up. Yeah. And Tara and Jerry ran field trips the next day. Did you go on those too?
No, I've been there for a time or two.
And I also want to just update you that one of the lags was for tricolor surveys, and Talon, which is primarily Ryan Phillips and some other De Anza faculty and grads, I guess some grad students he's working with too. And they did find, I should have read, and Tara can chime in here, but he found quite a great number of birds in the San Antonio Valley area, a colony of around 600 birds. And then there were birds sighted in other locations in the county, I think including, wasn't it Coyote Valley, where they were also foraging? Yep. Yep. So that's good news.
They've been there for a while.
And in the past, Kyle was gracious enough to allow Kailash to go out and do burrowing owl survey on his property, and we did see, Kailash did see tricolored birds out there last year, probably from this Henry Coe Park or from San Antonio Valley Colony, which we didn't know about. It's outside the plan area, but so what? Burrowing owl surveys will be started soon also, and keep your fingers crossed that we find at least the same number of birds as we did last year. I'm not.
The grass is so deep in all the places that I'm aware of, which
Okay.
is about 8 of them. The grass is so deep, I don't know how burrowing owl could get anything there. I don't know. Well,
No, it's good.
I'm anxious to see.
Yeah, it's a good question. And, because Kyle told us they used to breed on his property, they used to breed in Morgan Hill. It's, from what we were told by a rancher, they used to be out on Sargent Ranch area, so and these are areas that aren't being affected by development, so it's, I don't know. I keep say my prayers for the owls. And that's all I have to report on.
Any comments? Jess? No? All right, so just about to bring this meeting to a close, but before we do, is there any committee-initiated agenda items? No? Okay, so just the Silicon Valley Land Conservancy update next time? And the tour you've requested?
I think, how can we ask good questions unless we get out and see the
I'm on his side.
We'll gladly take you out there once we get further along,
And
out of respect.
I would think by our next August meeting, we'll also get maybe potentially a presentation on the OSA's landscape linkages report that we should be seeing
Sure.
in June, I believe, hopefully by June.
I'll talk to Matt about that.
Yeah, okay. So folks, I just want to thank you so much. This was a really long meeting. It was some of the materials pretty dense. Thank you very much, Tara and Ed, for putting this together, and Doug for slogging it through too. And let's not forget Angie. All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.